Everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Megan Hunter. I'm the President and CEO of the Morris County Chamber of Commerce and the Morris County Economic Development Corporation. We welcome you to this live webinar this morning that will also be recorded. We have been getting a lot of questions from our chamber members and members of the business community at large about all of the recent legislation and programs. So we thought it would be of value to the business community, to you, to have an opportunity to hear directly from our state and federal leaders to get your questions answered. And we certainly hope that today's program will demystify some of the confusion that might be out there. I would like to thank Alan Zakin, who leads our Government Affairs Committee. This program is brought to you by our Government Affairs Committee and the ELC. As we know, these are certainly challenging and uncertain times that we are navigating, and we are certainly grateful for the leadership and bipartisanship of Congresswoman Sherrill, State Senator Bucco, who represent Morris County and New Jersey so well and advocate on behalf of our residents and the business community and employees at the federal and state level. We are also glad to be joined by the CEO of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, Tim Sullivan, who I know has been working tirelessly to put together new programs and initiatives to keep our economy going during this challenging time. So as the saying goes, we are in this together, 6 feet apart. We're glad that you could join us virtually today, and we certainly look forward to the economic recovery ahead. Our thoughts and prayers go out to all of you who are affected by this virus and whose businesses have been severely impacted. So we thank you again for joining us today. And now I would like to introduce Richard Levesque with MWWPR, who will be our moderator. So thank you, Richard.
All right, thank you, Megan. Like Megan said, my name is Rich Levesque. I'm a Senior Vice President and General Manager of the Trenton Public Affairs Office for MWWPR. And my colleague Bill Murray, the Executive Vice President of Public Affairs and National Director, is also on the phone. Megan, I want to thank you, Mike Stanzilis, and Government Affairs Committee Chairman Alan Zakin, and the entire staff at the MCCC who have been so instrumental in making sure that this webcast is possible today. Also, I want to thank Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, her staff, especially Kelly Doucette, her district director, for making sure that this came together. Senator Tony Bucco Jr. for being here today, and his chief of staff, Bruce Sisler, and also Tim Sullivan and his staff at the NJEDA, especially Patient Purdy, who was instrumental in making sure this came together. So we're going to hear from our 3 panelists, and then we'll have time for some Q&A based on questions that were submitted by participants for today's conference. So I want to introduce our first speaker, Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill. Congresswoman Sherrill represents New Jersey's 11th Congressional District. A little bit of background on Congresswoman Sherrill. After graduating the United States Naval Academy in 1994, she spent almost 10 years on active duty in the United States Navy. Congresswoman Sherrill attended law school after leaving the Navy in 2003, earning a degree from Georgetown University. And she worked as a lawyer and eventually joined the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey. As an assistant U.S. attorney, she worked to keep our community safe, prosecuting federal cases and advising law enforcement on investigations. She holds a bachelor's degree from the United States Naval Academy and a master's degree in global history from the London School of Economics and Political Science, and a law degree from Georgetown University. Congresswoman Sherrill serves as freshman whip for the New Democrat Coalition, sits on the House Armed Services Committee, the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and she's the chairwoman of the Environment Subcommittee for the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. Now I'd like to turn it over to Congresswoman Sherrill to get us started and to say a few words. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Thanks, Rich. I appreciate it. First, I'd just really like to thank the Morris County Chamber, especially Mike Stanzilis and Megan Hunter and Alan Zakin for bringing us together today, as you said, together 6 feet apart, I think, Megan. Thank you for welcoming us all. I'd also like to thank Senator Bucco and Tim Sullivan for joining, and of course, Rich Levesque for moderating. I know how difficult things are right now for our business community, for our workers, and for our residents here in New Jersey. I'm on the phone every morning. In fact, right before this, I just got off the call with our hospitals to hear the daily report of what they're seeing on the front lines. And we have weekly small business roundtables, so we hear directly from many who are struggling and making those tough decisions on whether or not they can keep the business open, keep people employed, many of whom they've employed for many, many years. A lot of our small businesses are like family, so it's been a really difficult time. So in a few minutes, I'm going to give an overview of the legislation that's been passed. I'll focus mainly on the CARES Act, the most recent of the 3 pieces of coronavirus legislation Congress has passed and the president has signed. So we've worked hard to pass this legislation quickly and with broad bipartisan support, because that's what conditions on the ground in this pandemic have really required. But it's also important to note that even with these 3 massive pieces of legislation that the president signed, there's still more to do. So the speed with which we acted means that there may be some unintended consequences or holes that need to be filled with further legislation. So I need to hear from all of you in the community of what you're seeing on the ground. For example, I just had a meeting with Josh Gottheimer and the firefighters last night to hear about certain pieces of some firefighting aid that we gave that wasn't available to EMS workers. So these are just some holes that we're going to need to fill in future legislation. And we're working on the 4th piece of legislation right now. I'm on calls every day to try to advocate for what New Jersey needs in that next piece of legislation. So on to the specifics of what's been passed so far. 4 weeks ago, Congress passed a bipartisan emergency response funding package of $8.3 billion. That included $1 billion in loan subsidies for small businesses, more than $3 billion to the development of a treatment for a vaccine, and protected against price gouging, and provided about $1 billion for healthcare preparedness and community health centers. Sioux Falls Community Health Center in Morris County has already been awarded $118,000 in desperately needed aid from this program. 2 weeks ago, we passed the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. That was our 2nd piece of bipartisan legislation, also signed into law by the president. That strengthened paid leave programs for employees, provided $1 billion to states to cover the cost of administering increased unemployment benefit programs, and required no cost sharing for COVID-19 tests. It also included important funding for food assistance programs like WIC and our local food banks. Finally, at the end of last week, I traveled to DC to vote on the 3rd piece of coronavirus legislation, and this is broadly known as the CARES Act. This originated in the Republican Senate, was passed Friday in the House, and signed into law by the president. So again, largely bipartisan pieces of legislation. $150 billion for state and local governments to cope with the COVID-19 pandemic, including New Jersey receiving an estimated $3.44 billion. About $200 billion for hospitals, health providers, and health research. This was something that we fought very hard for in New Jersey. As many of you know, our hospital systems, including Atlantic, are really having difficulty. They early on have stopped all elective surgeries. They've moved to most of their practices now handling the coronavirus patients. It's taking a huge toll on our hospital systems here. So we've advocated for what some have called the Marshall Plan of our hospital system. $750 million in Centers for Disease Control state, local, and tribal grants to help agencies cope with this public health emergency, including an estimated minimum award of $15 million for New Jersey. There's $260 billion in expanded unemployment benefits. So as many of you are well aware, we have a lot of people working in non-traditional jobs in what we call the gig economy who aren't always covered by unemployment benefits. We've expanded unemployment benefits to cover a broader range of people. We've also increased what the states are doing. So on top of the state unemployment benefits, you'll receive $600 weekly to try to help you get through this difficult time. It provides immediate direct cash payments to lower and middle income New Jerseyans. So $1,200 for each adult and $500 for each child. It begins to phase out if individually you make over $75,000 a year, or if jointly you make over $150,000 per household. There is more than $375 billion in small business relief, $25 billion in aid for transit systems, which is critical here, including an estimate of $1.25 billion for New Jersey Transit, $9 billion in community development block grants and emergency solution grants. And so just yesterday we announced these. We're trying to move this money out quickly, and we put in the legislation timelines for some of this money and how quickly it has to get out. So just yesterday we announced $7.9 million is coming to counties and municipalities in NJ11, including over $1.7 million to Morris County and $127,000 to Parsippany, just for economic development, address homelessness, and secure housing assistance for low-income individuals. So I'd like to take just a minute before we move on to focus on some of the details of the CARES Act, because many people are starting to apply today for some of these loans. In particular, the $375 billion in small business relief. We've been getting a lot of questions about this in my office. So first of all, the Paycheck Protection Program loans. This program provides cash flow assistance to companies to meet costs such as payroll, benefits, rent, mortgage interest, and utilities. These loans will be forgiven for companies that maintain their payroll throughout this crisis. We're trying to incentivize our small businesses to be able to maintain their business, but also maintain their payroll so we can get to the other side of this. There is also a grace period if you furloughed workers or fired or laid off workers after February 15th and would like to rehire them and take advantage of this assistance, you are able to do that. Today, small businesses and sole proprietorships can apply for loans. Independent contractors and self-employed individuals can begin to apply for loans on April 10th. You can apply for these loans through SBA-approved lenders, and a tool to identify these lenders can be found on the SBA website. Nonprofits, including churches and museums with fewer than 500 employees, are also eligible for these forgivable loans. There are economic injury disaster loans and emergency economic injury grants. We expanded the Small Business Administration's long-standing economic injury disaster loan program, which offers up to $2 million in low-interest loans to businesses impacted by a disaster. Under the CARES Act, a $10,000 grant will also be issued as an emergency advance to businesses that apply for EIDL, irrespective of if that loan is ultimately approved. This grant does not need to be repaid under any circumstances. SBA is currently accepting applications through their website. It's so important that our businesses come out of this poised and ready to resume operations as quickly as possible and not saddled with debt. Some of the initial programs being discussed were small business loan programs. I advocated strongly to make some of these into grants or forgivable loans after hearing at our business roundtables how many businesses were not sure what this was going to look like on the other side and did not want to be saddled with debt when they weren't sure of how quickly they were going to be able to get on their feet. Finally, I want to touch on the work I've been doing to support our local manufacturers and the small businesses seeking to retool production to help with the manufacturing of PPE, personal protective equipment. As I said, I'm on the phone with hospital workers every morning. I'm also on the phone regularly with mayors and first responders, and we simply don't have enough PPE here in New Jersey for the current crisis and then for the other side of this crisis where we're going to need a lot more masks for everyday individuals. So we've connected with manufacturers with the New Jersey Manufacturing Extension Program. Thank you, Megan, for your help with this, and the governor's office. NJMEP is maintaining a capabilities database to keep track of companies that can support the supply chain. And I know, Megan, you've been working with the chamber to do something similar, so I really appreciate all the help you've given us. I have personally talked to companies like Honeywell. We've talked to Michael and Sue Avadia from Little Falls. They have in the past made jewelry display cases, but want to retool for masks. And Hani and Kenda Hammam, they have one of a very sophisticated thermoplastics machine. They have several of them. They're willing to turn one over to making PPE gear. The CARES Act included funding for MEPs across the country to help manufacturers retool production or get up and running. And we've been talking to Megan about this retooling as well. As I just mentioned, I'm looking forward to working with the Chamber on this issue. So I want to get to any questions you have for me, but in closing, a reminder that my office is ready to assist with any questions you have related to navigating federal agencies. We're working to help people navigate small business loan information, Social Security, and the rebate program. I know residents have a lot of questions about the CARES Act program. This information is all on my website at cheryl.house.gov/coronavirus. And we're continually working to update that and get resources available out to people, including things like food assistance, unemployment, small businesses, and mental health services. I know that these are tough and uncertain times. I know the Chamber's a great partner for resources and for all of the programming you're doing to help us get through this. And I know that this is a great district for everyone working together to get the support out to our communities and our citizens in need. Please look at us as a resource and let me know if there's any way I can help. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And we'll get to questions shortly. I'm sure people have a bunch of questions on the CARE Act and how your office can help them. Next is Senator Tony Bucco Jr., a lifelong resident of Morris County. Tony has served in the New Jersey State Senate since 2019, previously served in the General Assembly from 2010 to 2019, including as Republican conference leader for his final 2 years. Senator Bucco's been a commissioner of the Morris County Sheriff's Crime Stopper program since 1998, served with the Boonton Volunteer Fire Department since 1980, where he attained the rank of captain. Tony and his wife Amy reside in Boonton, and I'd like to turn it over to Senator Bucco to say a few words, and then we'll get to Mr. Sullivan and open it up for questions.
Thanks, Rich. I appreciate it, and I'm glad to be with you this morning. I want to thank the Chamber for providing the opportunity to have this forum this morning. The Chamber has always been ahead of the curve in supporting the business community in Morris County. It's great to be on with Congresswoman Cheryl and Tim Sullivan, who I have worked with over the last couple of weeks. In fact, Congresswoman Cheryl and I meet periodically to discuss issues going on in our districts so that we can work together to provide a better quality of life for our constituents and residents. I want to take a moment before I get into some of the things that are going on at the state level to allow everybody to think about all the healthcare professionals, first responders, and volunteers that are out there on the front line. These are unprecedented times. And as the weeks move forward, these folks will be pushed to their maximum capabilities. So if you are out there and you have the ability to show your appreciation to them, whether it's a post on Facebook, sending a card, or if you have the wherewithal to potentially drop off a lunch to these folks, I know they would greatly appreciate it. These are certainly tough times for them, both physically and mentally, as they deal with this crisis right on the front lines. For those that have access to PPEs, you've heard this over and over again. We are in desperate need of them, not only around the county, but around the state. There is a state website that is available. If you have them and you have the ability to donate some, you can get to that website. Please do so. It could save a life. These are difficult and trying times. Facing massive job losses in a condensed period of time, something that we have never seen before. Entire segments of the economy shutting down all at once. And there is really no state or federal response that would be an overreaction to this situation. But we recognize that we need tax relief, business grants, loans, direct cash to support the families an increased unemployment benefits. And we need to get it now, and we need to increase the amounts that have already been allocated. The good news is that essentially that's what the state and federal government is doing. But again, we understand that we need to deliver more and faster. The unemployment numbers are staggering. Nationally, almost 10 million people are unemployed. That could rise to an effective 17% unemployment rate. In New Jersey alone, there are 370,000 claims, which could rise in the coming weeks to about 12%. The good news is the unemployment compensation fund is in pretty good shape. That's a direct result of some of the reforms we put in place probably about 7 years ago or 8 years ago now to put that fund in a lockbox. Along with the money that is there and the help from the Federal Stimulus Act, we should be in pretty good shape in order to meet the demand. But we are going to have to monitor that very closely. If you need to file for a benefit, you can go to benefits.dol.nj.gov to file a claim. Those the claims that are coming in now obviously are coming in at a high volume, so sometimes the site is overloaded. If you have a problem, or you know someone that's having a problem filing a claim, you can reach out to my office or to your local legislative office. We have our staffs mostly working remotely, but we are available to provide help in those situations. We have continued to help people throughout the course of this crisis. Also, yesterday, the governor established the Emergency Child Care Assistance Program that will provide funding for child care for those essential workers. As you know, many of the child care facilities have been shut, so there are some that are open now under supervision of the state, and there is some funding available for those that need that assistance. The EDA also has a host of new programs that I'm sure Tim will talk about. I will leave that up to him. I was happy to be a prime sponsor of the legislation that opened up the EDA to receive the funds, not only from the state but federal government, to provide these new programs. Taken together, they will provide about $75 million in state and private financial support, with the opportunity to grow to more than $100 million if additional resources become available. That application process started today, and I am sure Tim will go over the process and give some additional information regarding how people can file and what they can expect. Obviously, the legislature and the state government was excited that Congress passed the stimulus package. The CARES Act will provide many new resources for small businesses, as well as certain nonprofits and other employers. The EDA that has announced their initiatives for the business community that include grant programs for small businesses, zero interest loan program for mid-sized companies, support for private sector lenders and community development finance institutions, and funding for entrepreneurs. The legislature has been working hard to support our state's businesses during these difficult times. But 2 weeks ago, we passed a 25-bill package to help our state's residents, workers, families, students, and businesses as we continue to battle COVID-19. One of the measures that the legislature put in to help businesses and workers included a temporary lost wage unemployment program, which allows those affected by the virus to recoup lost wages and assist employers in paying workers who are under quarantine. There was a $20 million appropriation for this program. That bill is on the governor's desk, and we are urging him to sign it. Additionally, bill was passed that would allow employees to earn sick leave, family leave, disability leave, if they are unable to work during a state of emergency because a physician or public health authority has determined that they should be quarantined to protect the health of others. Several other common sense measures, including allowing public bodies to conduct meetings electronically during a statewide or local emergency, have also been enacted. Additionally, you've heard lately that the bill that I sponsored originally to extend the tax filing deadline for personal and corporate business taxes that would have extended the deadline to June 30th will now, looks like there will be a new bill that we will address in the coming weeks to not only extend the deadline to match the federal filing deadline of July 15th, but also extend the state's fiscal year. The reason that we initially chose June 30th was because it was before the federal government had acted to extend the federal filing deadline, but also because our fiscal year ends on June 30th. So we needed to be able to get an idea of what the revenues would have been in order to enact a reliable budget. Now that we have reached a bipartisan compromise to move the fiscal year to September 30th, we are now in a place where we can extend the filing deadlines to July 15th, and that will be done, I hope, in the coming weeks. We also passed bills to create more access to telemedicine, provide health care coverage for testing, give the county and local clerks help for the upcoming elections, and make sure school-age children continue to be fed. In fact, it looks like we will be holding our first remote voting session probably in the next week or so to take up a number of additional bills, including some of the ones that the Assembly recently passed. Sometimes it's good that the Senate, there's some time in between when the Assembly acts on legislation till the time the Senate takes those bills up to give those bills a chance to settle out, so to speak. That's what's occurring now. We are beginning to see some of the unintended consequences of the legislation that was passed in the Assembly, and it'll give us time to make the corrections needed so that we don't have to go back and make changes again later on. I will be introducing a bill, hopefully this week, this week or next week, that will allow nonprofits to hold meetings by means of remote communications during the pandemic. This was something that we missed. I've heard from a lot of the nonprofits out there that we rely on, and that legislation has been prepared. I spoke to the Senate President about it yesterday, and I am hopeful that we will get that on the board list. In addition to that, we are looking at some legislation that would allow contributions, tax-deductible contributions to our charities and nonprofits. That will certainly help them on that side. We hope to take up the bills that allow for professional and occupational licenses to be reactivated and expedited. That is critical in this time when we need to get people, especially in the healthcare area. Additionally, we hope to take up the bill that would clarify that notaries will be allowed to act remotely so that documents can continue to be processed efficiently and effectively. Finally, yesterday, I called on the governor's office to appoint a business advocate within the front office. My suggestion would be the lieutenant governor, someone that could act quickly and have decision-making authority to address the economic side of this crisis. Clearly, the governor's responsibility, first and foremost, is to the public health, safety, and welfare of our residents. That is taking up his full time. But we need somebody within the administration to look at the economics side of this crisis, and someone that can act and make decisions as quickly as possible. You know, we saw recently the ability to give craft breweries the ability to deliver their product at home. We saw the administration open up retail car sales remotely. Real estate agents were given guidance on how to continue in their practice. These are all ways that we can continue to keep people working safely, but most importantly, working. And we need to have that ability to continue to keep people at work, but we need to do it safely. And if we need to make adjustments, we need somebody in the administration to take up these issues and guide our business communities through these things. I ask that folks that have issues reach out. We are, like I said, we are receiving calls and emails and responding as quickly as possible and trying to keep getting everybody the information they need to continue during these unprecedented times. I'll continue to press the legislative leadership to post legislation that my colleagues and I are working on to support the business community. It's clear now more than ever that we have to be there for New Jersey businesses of all shapes and sizes, and we will continue to do that. Again, I want to thank everybody for being on the call, and I hope that we will be able to address your issues. If not, we will certainly get the information and get back to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Senator Bucco. Our last speaker before we open to questions is Tim Sullivan. Tim's the Chief Executive Officer of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, and he started there in February of 2018. The NJEDA serves as the state's principal agency for driving economic growth and is committed to making New Jersey a national model for inclusion and sustainable economic development. During his tenure, Tim has led the NJEDA's transformation into a comprehensive economic development organization, including the creation of new offices and initiatives aimed at implementing Governor Phil Murphy's vision for a stronger and fairer economy. Tim recently served as the Deputy Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development. Prior to that, he was the Chief of Staff to the New York City Deputy Mayor for Economic Development. And he also worked at Barclays Capital and Lehman Brothers in the early to mid 2000s. Tim's a graduate of Georgetown University, and we're happy to have him join us today. Tim, if you'd like to say a few words, and then we'll open it to questions.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Rich, for that very kind introduction. Good morning to everyone. Congresswoman and Senator, it's an honor to be with you, and thank you for the great comments and all the programs that you highlighted. I'll just go quickly through some of the things that Governor Murphy's really been focusing on. I think Senator Bucco laid out so much of the great work that's happening at the state level. I just want to add a couple things to that. So, you know, first and foremost, I think as both the Congresswoman and the Senator said, obviously this is a public health crisis first and foremost, but right behind it, it's an economic crisis, and one that's going to be with us for not only the duration of the public health crisis, but a recovery that is going to take longer, I think, than maybe anyone would have imagined even just a couple of weeks ago. And so obviously what's happened at the federal level with the CARES Act and some of the other legislation, and what's happened at the state level is enormously important to beginning that recovery. I think the first thing I just want to say on behalf of the governor and our entire team, if you're taking the time to watch this webinar and learn about business resources and things that are out there, it means you're experiencing the hardship and difficulty that this crisis is causing for so many people, and we're sorry for what you're going through, and we're sorry that this is happening. Obviously, everyone woke up one day and this thing was happening around them, and if you're a business owner or a business leader or manager, not only dealing with the anxieties and the challenges of this that we're all dealing with as humans and as people and as parents and children and neighbors, but also thinking about it from the business perspective, we're deeply sympathetic and sorry for the challenge that this is presenting to you. The governor just last Thursday announced a suite of initiatives that the EDA board approved to support small business through this crisis. First and foremost, I think the Congresswoman said it perfectly earlier. You know, the goal of anything we do right now on the business side has really got to be stabilization. If you're looking for one word, recovery will come when the public health crisis abates. What shape that recovery will be, a V shape, a U shape, a W, I don't know. Certainly the unemployment numbers at the federal and national and state level are terrifying and something we've never seen before, but we don't know what the shape of that snapback will be. We do know, however, that the better positioned more enterprises are to be stable and to be stabilized through this crisis, the better position will be to recover more quickly. However, whatever rate, whatever shape that ends up being, the more businesses, the more small businesses in particular that we can help get stabilized and make payroll and pay their rent, make their mortgage, make their debt service payment, and stay intact and ready to come out of this hibernation period whenever that ends is really critical. We're really trying, at the state level, we're trying to stretch our resources and focus them on the smallest businesses, the hardest hit part of the economy. Obviously, the big business part of the economy has been hit hard as well, and there's no shortage of challenges there. Small businesses employ a ton of people, and they have the thinnest margins typically and the thinnest balance sheets and resources to handle a crisis like this. So that's really where the governor has directed us to focus our resources and our efforts. The package that the governor announced last week was about a $40 million direct package of EDA resources. It's off the EDA balance sheet versus an appropriation or whatever. So that's EDA resources. We think that, as the senator said, that'll be leveraged up to around $75 million of public and private money together through some of our lending partners, and that could stretch even further depending on how the banks leverage up our money, and also if additional resources become available, either philanthropic or private sector resources, or potentially federal resources that may come through the states. Just to keep it simple, the programs that we are responsible for now on the governor's behalf is a small business grant. We have opened the application for that this morning. That's a $5 million grant pool. I'll let the governor make the news on how that application process is going in his briefing later today. I can tell you that we were expecting a ton of applications, and even our very aggressive expectations were met and exceeded. So we've seen a huge influx of applications for that program, and we were expecting to be oversubscribed. We are oversubscribed already, and we will look to find additional resources to scale that program up as we go. We've also said we're going to stand up a $10 million zero interest loan program. We just announced that we're going to publish the application for that on Monday, this coming Monday, and then the applications will go live the subsequent Monday. So folks will have a week to read through that application, make sure they understand everything they're going to need, make sure they get their financials in order, because that will also be first come, first serve. We expect that to be oversubscribed, but we wanted to give people plenty of time to get their ducks in a row and get their paperwork together, or their electronic paperwork together. There's no paper to get ready for that application. So application goes public, if you will, on Monday, and then 10 days from now, the application goes live for that loan program. We're also working to provide some liquidity to the CDFI world through a $10 million loan loss fund that we'll be standing up with the community development finance institutions to stretch their dollars. The good news is the banks are better positioned going into this crisis for sure than they were in 2008. When I say the banks, I mean both the private sector for-profit banks and CDFIs. That's a good thing, but this is an incredibly challenging period for their existing customers and potential new customers. So we wanted to provide some first loss provision and some credit protection and risk enhancement for them to be able to stretch their balance sheets. So we think that's going to be an important program as well. And then the last thing I'll mention is that we are standing up a program to support entrepreneurs. So mostly we've been talking about folks that are bank customers, generally speaking, in the small business community. When we think about entrepreneurs and startups and younger companies that are typically equity funders or self-funders from personal resources, that funding pool is also drying up. So we've created an 80% guarantee program to support existing investors investing additional money into start young companies. That's a $5 million program as well. I hope that we end up scaling that program as well, because I think there's significant need there as we think about the innovation economy and the Main Street economy coming together there in the entrepreneurial world. The last thing I'll mention real quickly is we stood up some technical assistance resources. So the SBA programs, both the existing ones and the new ones that were done in the CARES Act, are important, and we want to make sure that those that businesses have the support they need to get their applications into those programs. And particularly wanted to make sure historically underserved communities were part of that outreach effort. So we've partnered with the African American Chamber of Commerce, the statewide Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the statewide Veterans Chamber, as well as Rising Tide Capital, which is an entrepreneur focus group in Jersey City, to make sure that businesses have the resources they need and the support they need to navigate the federal programs and the state programs as well. So a lot going on. I could talk for a bunch more, but I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions. And again, it's an honor to be with the Congresswoman and the Senator, and thanks to the Morris Chamber for organizing this and inviting me.
Tim, thank you. We know you've been running up and down the state and all over the place. We appreciate you spending some time with us this morning. We'll jump right into questions, cognizant of time and everybody's schedule, so we'll get to as many as we can. I guess this is more directed at Tim, possibly the Senator and the Congresswoman as well. Are there any restrictions on applying for both SBA assistance and EDA assistance? And can I get an EDA grant and an EDA loan, or is it one or the other? And what are some of the criteria involved?
Yeah, short answer is applying for SBA stuff won't conflict you out of EDA stuff. I haven't seen the fine print on things like Paycheck Protection Program yet. It's possible. So I can, in one direction, I can say definitively, SBA does not get you in trouble with the EDA. You should be okay on most of the SBA programs that are pre-existing that I know the details of. You can get a grant and a loan if you qualify. The grant is for folks with under 10 employees. So it's the smallest businesses. The loan is for businesses under 5 million in revenue. So if you are in both categories, you could get both. We do, again, the grant is up and running this morning. We do think, I know for sure it's oversubscribed already. So the loan program will be an important tool as well.
Okay, great, thank you. State and federal question. I'm 100% and majority owner of multiple businesses. Am I able to apply for SBA EIDL assistance for multiple businesses? Congresswoman, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that, if you have an answer on that.
Okay, I'm off mute. So there's a couple of things related to some of these grants. First of all, for the PPE and the EIDL grant, I've also seen some questions in the chat. If you do, on the payroll protection, if you do start to lay off some people, it will be prorated. So you won't have to pay back the full payroll protection amount. You'll have to prorate it based on the people you did not keep on payroll. If you apply for both the PPO or the PPP and the EIDL grant, you can do that. You can apply for both. But if you're approved for both and you receive the $10,000 grant, that grant's going to be applied towards your loan forgiveness under the PPP. As far as multiple businesses, I haven't seen anything specifically related to not being able to apply for multiple businesses. We have had some problems with some of our businesses that come. There are multiple pieces of the business that come under one umbrella, so they're too large to apply, and that's something that we're looking at for the fourth piece of legislation, so that we can make sure that those individual businesses are looked at individually so they can get the money. But as far as applying separately for individual businesses, I've not seen anything that would prohibit you from doing that, but I'm happy to look further into that and get back to whoever needs
it. Great. Thank you, Congresswoman. We appreciate that. Question from folks that are watching online right now. How do we add 1099 amounts or employees to payroll PPP loan amounts? Do we divide by 12? Or how do you count 1099 employees versus W2 employees? And is there maybe a resource or a website that we can go to answer some of those types of questions?
So we've, as part of the legislation, I realized that there has been some problems with the websites and getting in touch, but we have a lot of the resources from the SBA, from Treasury, from the House of Representatives, different guides to help you on my website. The SBA is really promulgating all of those regulations right now. I'm even seeing from the chat, something that we've been alerted to just yesterday was that some of the Treasury regulations that were supposed to be promulgated have not, some of the banks don't feel like they've gotten all the information that they need. So we've alerted Treasury that we need those immediately, because obviously we've got to get these grants out. and they're supposed to be, people are applying today for them. But some of that regulation will come from the SBA, and their website has a lot of the information on that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Rich,
Yes.
Tony Bucco.
Yes, Tony, absolutely.
Many of the technical issues that and technical questions that are being asked, we may not have the answer to today, but I would encourage those that are on that have those technical questions, especially at the state level, to contact either my office or their legislator's office with those questions. We can run them. We can run them up the chain and get the answers for them. If they're on the federal level, obviously Congresswoman Cheryl's office will do the same. But many of these technical issues, unless Tim has an answer to them, it's kind of hard for us just here today to get into that kind of detail. But that doesn't mean that we can't get the answer for the folks that need those questions answered.
Now that's a great point, Senator. Now your office, the Congresswoman's office, have been great so far. We appreciate the support that you've given us.
Yeah, the one thing I would mention, of course, always the legislators' offices are always great resources, and particularly in this time, deeply appreciate their leadership. The state has 2 web portals that are really good and being consistently updated and have a chat feature. One is cv.business.nj.gov. There's lots of dots in there. cv.business.nj.gov has all the information about anything to do with the economy and what's going on in the business world at the state level. And it does have some of the federal information on there as well. We're updating that as we get it. There's also a chat feature on there. So if you've got a question that's very specific, there's live people answering those questions on chat. There's also covid19.nj.gov, which is everything to do with the entire COVID health crisis. Principally public health and all those kinds of things, but all the executive orders, the regulations, all the stuff that's been promulgated by the governor's office, that of course links to the business stuff as well. So those are 2 good resources. They're not going to be tailored, to XYZ business specifically, but they are a really good resource. But as the senator said, obviously always, if there's, please feel free to reach out to us directly via the legislators' offices to get us any specific questions we can help troubleshoot.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. This next question, I guess, is for everybody. It's a little bit possibly unfair, but there's a lot of concern about the length of these businesses being closed, and talking about 8-week periods and things like that. So what have been some of the discussions internally? We hear different things from the federal level and the state level of when businesses will get back up and running, when people will be allowed back to work. We know the importance of flattening the curve. We've heard that from multiple people on a daily basis. But this is extremely hard on the New Jersey economy, national economy. What are people's thoughts on getting back to work, trying to get back to some sort of level of normalcy? I guess we'll start with the Congresswoman, if you want.
I get that question a lot. I don't think that's an unfair question at all. That's something that we're all concentrating on and we're all very concerned about. I think we've been working very hard in New Jersey, and we're kind of in the middle of an unwanted social experiment on how best to handle this. And New Jersey's on the front lines. We are setting the path because unfortunately we've been one of the first hit places in the nation. So I think what we've taken, and I think what the legislature has done here, and Senator Bucco and the governor, and what we've as a delegation tried to help with, is to keep people as safe as possible. Those people that can work from home, as you probably have noticed from our kitchens and our drapes, etc. We're all teleworking to the best of our ability to keep everyone safe. But there are manufacturers, there are businesses that we do need to keep open, that we need to keep running, and we've tried to keep some of those personnel in place so they can keep running. But I've talked to people, this is wedding season. So we talk to our florists and our event halls and our nail salons and our hairstylists, and their businesses are shut. And it's really hard to keep going through this. So the question on everyone's mind is what's the best way to keep everyone safe, to flatten the curve, as they say, but then to get people quickly back to work. And I think it's an important discussion to have now. I was in the military, and when you're in the military, you're either in a crisis or you're preparing to be in a crisis. And part of that is thinking ahead, thinking about what our next crisis is. And so what we're doing now is we're handling what's happening now I'm on the phone hours a day. I know from talking to him, Senator Bucco's on the phone hours a day, trying to get that PPE gear here, trying to take care of people here now, trying to get ventilators here into New Jersey, trying to hear from our hospital systems how we can support them. But we're also thinking about what the other side of this looks like. And I think that's the discussion many of us are having now. What are those signs that will tell us that it's time to get back to work? And we need to start educating people on those so they're comfortable doing that. The reason, and I kind of flagged this a little bit in my remarks, the reason I'm so focused on PPE is because of the immediate health problems now for our healthcare workers and our first responders, but also because if we're going to ask people to get back to work, I don't know how many of you are going to be comfortable getting on a subway in a couple months, right? Without a mask. Now, if you have an N95 mask, maybe if you have some gloves, you might be more comfortable doing that. We also need to get wide, we need to, and I've talked to our medical systems now, we need antibody tests, I think. We need to understand about a quarter of our population could very well have had coronavirus and never even know it. But if you've had that and you know it, and you can take the antibody test and know that you have some level of immunity to the coronavirus, that might be a way for you to get back to work and to help our economy. So these are some of the things that we're discussing now. I don't have a date certain. I have heard from our systems that we're looking at the peak of the curve in probably about 2.5 weeks, getting to the top of the curve. And then we're really hoping we'll be on the other side of that. And because we're going to be the first in the nation, I think getting people on the other side of this and getting people back to work, we also have to be thinking about how we deal with all the other people across the country that are then going to be in the thick of a coronavirus outbreak so that we can keep people here safe. So these are all the conversations that we're having now. And I know Senator Bucco's been having them. I know I've been having them. Everyone on this call's probably been having them to try to understand how we get our economy back up and running as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Thank
Rich,
you, Congressman. Senator, you have a few words on that?
Yeah, Rich, this is why yesterday I called on the governor's office to appoint somebody in the front office to deal with the economic side of this crisis. As the Congresswoman said, you know, first and foremost, we have to deal with the health aspects. But while we're dealing with that and focused on that, somebody needs to be preparing so that we're not starting the economic process once the health process is over. Somebody needs to start planning and making decisions now and allowing the governor to do what he's doing best, and that is taking care of our residents. So, you know, my thought was use the lieutenant governor. She was a former speaker. She knows the system. You know, she knows how it operates. Give somebody in the front office that has quick decision-making authority the ability to start looking at this and planning for how we come out of this economically. And quite frankly, how we can think outside the box now to get some people back to work safely. You know, like I said, the craft breweries, you know, the car sales remotely. Those are all things that are putting people back to work before the crisis is over. So we need not only to have somebody there who can take the recommendations from businesses, sort them out, determine if we can put some segments of the economy back to work safely, but also begin planning for that long-range plan. Let the governor deal with the health crisis. That's the governor's main objective. That should be his main objective. That should be our main objective. But get somebody in the administration dealing with this other side, this economic side, so that they can make decisions and start putting that plan together. And my suggestion was the lieutenant governor. I thought that's a great spot for her, and she has the ability to get that done.
Oh, very, very good point, Senator. Just so everyone that's on the call understands, we've received dozens and dozens of questions through the Q&A portal that have been emailed in to Mike and Megan and the staff at the MCCC. We're going to do our best to coordinate with the three officials' offices that are on the call right now. We know we have a hard stop at 11 o'clock, so I want to, on behalf of MWW, the MCCC, and myself, I want to really appreciate the time and that you gave us this morning to be on this webinar and to be able to speak to some of the important issues that are going on, obviously, in the state, throughout the nation, and potentially throughout the world. I'd like to just toss it back over to Megan Hunter for some closing remarks, and thank everybody for participating this morning.
Great. Thank you, Richard. So on behalf of the Chamber, I want to thank the Congresswoman and Senator Bucco and Tim Sullivan for being with us today. Thank you all for participating on this call. As Richard said, we will endeavor to answer all of your questions offline and publish them on our website. So please visit marschamber.org for more resources that can be of assistance to your business. Please know that the Chamber and the EDC are here for you. Please do not hesitate to call us, and be safe, and we hope to see you soon, whether virtually or in person. So have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful weekend. Thank you again.